what we're going to do today is we are going to be specifically talking about really how to live the very best life. And some VIPs actually asked me about, hey, do you think we could do a show about how to overcome some of the stressors in life, and like really, because they start to learn about this parasympathetic versus sympathetic nervous system. It's like rest, digest, recovery, activation of your nervous system versus the fight or flight or freeze or stress part of your nervous system. And you can actually control that a lot with things you do in your daily life and your activities. And it is really so very important to be able to harness and optimize this area. And it's also has a lot to do with how you digest your food, how you exercise, how you go after so many different things, your circadian rhythm or your pattern of your daily wake cycle, when you're expending more energy, when you should let your body rest better, all these many, many facets of things. And, it's really the most important and one of the biggest dominoes to knock down that knocks down every other domino is, of course, physical exercise, and the healthiest physical exercise. And the reason for that is because when you exercise, you stimulate pretty much every other cell in the body to become healthier, to become more active and fit itself. Literally, that's basically how it works with fitness and exercise, and putting the fatigue stress of exercise on your body. But there are some things that really should even come first before exercise to get the best results from exercise, and also after exercise, again, to get the best results. So exercise is amazing, and it's one of the most important things, and our VIPs know that very well. They're doing the healthiest exercise they possibly could. But there's some things that should come before that, because when you're getting into really developing your fitness and your capabilities, your body needs to be in a state to receive that physical stimulus, so that the message isn't received as trauma. Because if you go into your exercise, for example, and you don't have the right meditative state, actually, we'll all learn from Sachin today. Watch him when he's speaking. Look how calm he is. I like to get pumped up and talk and bring energy. And there's a big value for that. In my personal life, I like to really relax. But Sachin, I'm always in awe by Sachin, who is going to be our guest expert today, because he's so tranquil. And this is something that I'm always looking to add to my life, is more tranquility. He's so tranquil, the way he's poised, the way he speaks. So not to put Sachin on the spot here, but to put Sachin a little bit on the spot, and really for all of us to learn from how he is, because he's a being that really has mastered that. So, when you enter exercise, you don't want to have trauma. And if you get into exercise in the wrong way, it could be really the healthiest exercise. But if you're overloading your body more than you're really capable of, or you're going into it with the wrong mindset, your body can receive that exercise as trauma. So, and that can do with the way you're breathing, the way you're living your daily patterns, the rest you're getting, the way you're eating. Sachin's going to talk about all of those things with us today. And two, with exercise, you want to have the very best results and recovery from each bout of exercise. So, Sachin again is going to share things with us that's going to help in all of those areas. And it's really a multifaceted approach. And so, Dr. Sachin Patel has Perfect Practice, which is an organization where he trains other health experts and coaches to be better in their field, and also specifically to become functional health practitioners, right? And he also has the Living Proof Institute, where he helps individuals optimize all the types of things that he's going to talk with us about today. So without further ado, please help me welcome, as I call him, my brother from another mother, Dr. Sachin Patel. Welcome to the Full Body Fix, my friend.
Thank you, Robbie. Thank you. I greatly appreciate you, and Patricia as well, for everything that you do to help love on people. It truly comes through your admiration to help people live a better quality of life. And I am grateful to be able to share a piece of this time and energy with each and every one of you. And I hope your future self thanks you. That's my goal, is for you to say an hour or an hour and a half from now, I'm so glad I attended this conversation. And that's what I hope for this to be, not me presenting to you and and shouting orders on the top of the mountain necessarily, but having a dialogue and a conversation. Because when it comes to health, just like Robbie could probably do the same. I know he can. I could be here talking to you for days and days and days and not run out of things to say. What I want to know is what's most important to you. Definitely going to cover the topics that Robbie mentioned, but we have the opportunity, because we have an intimate group, we have the opportunity to really dial into what your needs are and what's most pressing for you. And one of the things that I've learned is that you may have signed up a few days ago or even a week ago to hear this conversation, but your priorities can change. Sometimes an event in your life or some news that comes into your life can change your priorities overnight. So what I'd love to start with is, one, I'd love to invite all of you to turn your cameras on. I think that would be very special so we can see each other. I want you to pretend like we're sitting in a room together and present to this dialogue and conversation. The fact that you've taken time out of your day to be here tells me that this is important to you. And I want to see you. I want to visually see you. It gives me the cue to know that you're there, that the message is landing for you. And as you know, as human beings, we would rather all be in a room in person. And the next closest thing that we can do is be on camera. So I listen and pay attention, or I can't listen to your body language, but I pay attention to your body language. So when I see heads nodding, when I see faces smiling, that's an important nutrient for our brain. Believe it or not, the human face is a mathematical algorithm, and it sends important information to other people's brains. That's why a simple smile can instantly change somebody's physiology. That's why when you're grumpy, your face is the first part of your body to show it, right? So it helps when you're in a dialogue and when you're in a conversation to show your face so that you can get the most out of our time together. And, this fills me up as well. So I love seeing smiling faces. So maybe it's a little bit of a selfish ask on my part, but it helps me understand if what I'm saying is landing for you. Okay. So I know there's a billion other places you could be, but you're here. So let's be here fully. Right. And what I've often said is the extra mile is just an inch. Right. So you just have to move your mouse just an inch and press video, and you can turn your video on. Right. And you can go that extra mile and get the most out of our conversation together. Okay. So I understand not all of you can do that, but those of you that can, it's an invitation. And I hope that you're able to tune in and be as fully present as you can be. So as Robbie was gracious enough to introduce me as his brother from another mother, so we adopted the same style. We've got these beautiful beards and these bald heads. And I know Robbie wears glasses on occasion, so we did inherit some gifts from our great mother. However, we are brothers in many other ways as well. We are brothers in arms in trying to help make the world a better place, in trying to help people unlock their inner gifts, right? That's the cool thing about what Robbie and Patricia do, is they help you unlock your gifts by showing you what your body is capable of. And what I help people do is something very similar. I help them understand their gifts in terms of what their body is capable of helping them do, what their environment is capable of helping them do, what their food is capable of helping them do. And what we've done over the years is we've created a system and a process that has helped thousands of people and hundreds of practitioners help their clients heal. One of the things that I've learned is that rolling a boulder up a hill is very difficult, right? And that's what it feels like for some people when it comes to their health. Raise your hands if it ever feels like getting healthy is like rolling a boulder up a hill, right? And it feels like the moment you stop doing the work, you kind of go backwards, right? And the boulder goes all the way to the bottom and it feels like you have to start all over again. So our philosophy is that being healthy should be like rolling a boulder down a hill. Okay, you've done the hard work. You were born. You lived until this ripe age that you're at right now. With all the wisdom and experience that you have, imagine the capabilities if you could unlock it, and we could come up with a simple strategy for you that is active in some ways, but passive in most ways. So my philosophy is 80-20. Some of you may have heard of the Pareto principle. Imagine 20% of the things that you do creating 80% of the results that you desire. Who would like to know that? Who would like to know how they can do 20% of the things that they're doing and maybe even 20% of the effort, but get 80% of the result? Yeah, that's what you should all desire. So I like pulling levers when it comes to health and wellness. I like making it easy. And most importantly, I like to make it passive. Okay. Passive means that you don't even realize you're doing it. Now, of course, if you're exercising, you're going to realize you're doing it. But if you're exercising with Robbie and Patricia, you're having fun at the same time. So you're filling up multiple buckets. You're not just traumatizing your body. Uh, you're gently nourishing it and providing it with the most powerful nutrient to the brain, which is movement. So this concept of proprioception, which is the information that's being communicated from the joints to the brain, is the single most important nutrient to the brain itself. So things like going for a walk can make a profound difference in your overall health and wellness. Now we can stack going on a walk by going on a walk in nature. We can go on a walk in the woods. We can go on a walk and breathe correctly while we're walking. We can go on a walk and actually use our visual gaze to improve our eyesight. We can go on a walk and actually improve our proprioception and balance. We can go on a walk and inhale the essential oils coming off of the trees and improve our immune system, and inhale microspores that are coming up from the soil and improve our immune system as well. So going on a walk in the woods is totally different than going on a walk on a treadmill in your home. Okay. So imagine doing the same activity, but doing it in a specific way that enhances the benefit 5, 10, maybe even 100-fold. Okay. We were designed to move, and as much as possible, we were designed to move outside. So these are simple things that we're going to talk about today, things that you probably already know, but I like to back things up with a little bit of science, some common sense, some fun, and some humor. And I hope that if anything, what you end up with is a little version of Robbie and Patricia on one shoulder and a little version of me on the other shoulder. And everywhere you go from this point forward, we're right there with you, cheering you on. Okay. We're not here to villainize you or scold you or victimize you in any way. We're here to cheer you on and make sure you live the best life possible. Is everyone in agreement with that? Is everyone okay with that? Raise your hand if that's a yes. All right. Amazing. I'm going to share my screen, and I periodically may share a little bit of soft music as well, just to set the mood. What I'd like to do right now is I would love to understand what inspired you, what jumped out to you, besides, of course, your amazing host and hostess today, Robbie and Patricia. What jumped out to you to join our conversation? So let's practice using the chat, and go ahead and type into the chat so I can get a sense of what brought you here today. Okay. So it seems like stress and resilience is a very popular topic these days. And while it is something that we all deal with, stress is ultimately, believe it or not, a concept of our perception. So the stress that our body undergoes is actually how we respond to the situation. And how we respond to any situation is a function of our experiences and our belief system. So a lot of times when a situation pops up, you might have one person that's completely freaked out about it and one person that has no stress or anxiety around the situation at all. How many of you have ever encountered that, where your spouse, perhaps given the same circumstances, is not stressed out at all about the situation? And sometimes their lack of being stressed out stresses you out even more, right? You're like, why aren't you stressed out? Why aren't you stressed out as me? And it's because stress is not necessarily a physical response, it's an emotional response to a situation. Now, that doesn't negate the response, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have the response, but that's where we can start, because we can't always change a situation, right? Changing the situation is usually the hardest part. And changing the situation makes us feel almost weak in the situation, or it makes us feel helpless. But what we can change is how we perceive the situation. Now, there's a part of our brain called the amygdala. You won't be quizzed on this, but it's kind of a fun word. And the amygdala is part of our reptilian brain. It's a part of our brain that all other animals have. Okay. What differentiates us as human beings is this part of our brain called the frontal cortex, the neocortex, right? That's what gives us our thinking abilities. When we go into a state of fight or flight, we don't send as much blood into that part of our brain. So stress literally shuts down our thinking faculties. This is why we say things that we wouldn't normally say in a stressful situation. This is why when we have time to calm down, we then come up with what the right thing to say should have been, right? How many of you have experienced that before, right? After the situation fizzles out a little bit, you're like, oh, that's what I should have said. Why did I say that? And you kind of wish you didn't say something in some situations. It's because the thinking part of our brain literally shuts down. And that just makes you human. Now, many of us may not realize this, but our past experiences, some of them are going to be conscious experiences that we actually remember. And some of them are going to be unconscious experiences that predate our ability to even speak or to remember. There's parts of your life that you don't even remember. There's parts of your life that you couldn't even speak. So how can you form a memory and relive that memory with that voice in your head if when the memory occurred, you didn't even speak a language? Right? So a lot of our stress and response to a situation may come from an experience that we had that's still lurking there as a protective mechanism that's putting us in a state of survival. And when we're in a state of survival, we can't be in a state of thriving. Those are two different things. When we go into a state of fight or flight, we shut down all healing in our body. We shut down all repair in our body. We shut down digestion. We shut down thinking. We shut down detoxification. We shut down bone building, muscle repair. All the things that you're seeking, all the things that you want, all the reasons that you're here shut down when we go under stress. And that's beneficial to us in a short-term situation, in a survival situation. If a lion's chasing you, building lean muscle is not going to save you right now. Building new bone is not going to save you right now. Remembering the grocery list is not going to save you right now. Digesting your breakfast is not going to save you right now. We need all hands on deck to survive the situation. But we don't really have lions chasing us anymore, do we? In some ways we do, right? We have this metaphoric lion, right? Like financial stress, like all the things that you see on the news, right? Our health may be a source of stress, or somebody else's health or health situation might be a source of stress for us. Sometimes we get bad news, or maybe not the news that we desired, and that puts us in a stressful situation. So today I'm going to teach you some tools that can be helpful in helping you reduce that stress response and perhaps even revisit why you have that response in the first place. You know, my wife has an irrational fear towards spiders, and she can't pinpoint why. She doesn't know where that fear comes from because she's not scared of other insects. She's not scared of lobsters or crabs, which look very similar, but she's deathly afraid of spiders. And so we actually went through some reprogramming of her unconscious mind, and now she's not as afraid anymore. Right? So we can reprogram our beliefs. We can reprogram our phobias that we may think we have. We can reprogram our stress response so that it's more rational. How many of you would say you may have an irrational stress response to something that's going on in your life? Raise your hand, be honest. Okay. And the rest of you are too stressed to raise your hand. Is that right? That's my interpretation. So here's a tool I want you to use. It's called a physiologic sigh. We're going to do this together. It's really easy. Now, this tool is so powerful that you don't want to abuse it. So you want to use this under times of significant stress, and when you need to just pause, take a moment, and kind of process whatever situation is coming up for you. So you're going to sit up nice and straight. And I'll explain this, and then we'll do this 3 times together. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a nice deep breath in, filling up the belly, filling up the chest, filling up the top of the lungs. And then at the very top, you're going to take another sip of air, filling up your lungs all the way. And then you're going to hold that just for a pause at the top, just for about 3 to 4 seconds, and I'll count you down. And then you're going to let it out with an audible sigh. Okay, so let's all try that together. Take a deep breath in. One more sip. Hold it at the top and let it out in 3, 2, 1 with a sigh. One more time. Take a deep breath in, filling up the belly, the lungs, all the way in. Another sip at the top. And let it out with a sigh. And we're going to do one more. This time you're going to really let it out with a loud sigh. A long, loud sigh, as long as you can, and empty out those lungs all the way. Okay, so take a deep breath in. One more sip at the top. Hold at the top. And we're going to let it out with a sigh, fully exhaling, nice audible sigh, a sense of relief, all the way out, all the way out. Empty your lungs. All the way out. Perfect. Great. So this is called a physiologic sigh. One of the things that this does is it fills up your alveoli sac. Your alveoli are in the highest density at the very bottom of your lungs. When we let it out with a sigh and we let the air all the way out, we're releasing all the carbon dioxide that's in our lungs. Carbon dioxide in our lungs actually increases our sense of fear, stress, and anxiety. Our need to breathe doesn't come from our need for oxygen. Believe it or not, our need to breathe actually comes from our intolerance to carbon dioxide. So many times when we're trying to catch our breath, what we really need to focus on is not inhaling more air because we're just packing our lungs down. What we need to focus on is the exhale. So when it comes, just like when it comes to stress, it's so metaphoric, right? Letting go. Letting go of the things that are not serving us, the thoughts that are not serving us. In this case, the molecules that are not serving us. What most people do when they're under stress, what's the natural tendency? Is it to inhale and hold your breath, or is it to exhale? Type in your answer in the chat. Well, Robbie's got it. He's paying attention. Inhale, and we hold our breath, right? And what that does is it actually creates more stress in our body. So we want to do the opposite. We have this built-in mechanism that helps us de-stress, which is called the physiologic sigh. So this is something easy, simple that you can use. You can use it while you're driving. If somebody agitates you when you're driving, instead of letting that boil your blood and change your chemistry, just let it happen. Realize it probably has nothing to do with you, and you're glad you're not that person. Count your blessings and just take a physiologic sigh. When you need to switch gears, you can use the physiologic sigh. Really simple thing that you can do. Okay, so letting go. Now, how many of you, this is something new that I learned, and I wanted to put this out there, but how many of you knew that you can measure the carbon dioxide levels in your home? Does anyone here measure their carbon dioxide levels in their home? Okay, a couple of you. So this is really fascinating because you can get a meter. Here's mine right here. It's called the AeroNet 4. And there's different versions of it. You don't have to buy this one. You don't even have to buy one. But what I learned with this is that right now you can see that my CO2 parts per million is 603. If it goes above 1,000, there's a 15% decline in cognitive function. So research at Harvard showed that CO2 levels actually cause a decline in our cognitive function. At a parts per million of 1,400 or higher, there's a 50% decline in cognitive function. So my wife and I did a few experiments. And the first experiment we did was sleeping with our windows open and sleeping with our windows closed. How many of you feel like you could use more rest, or perhaps wish you could sleep an extra hour or half an hour, or you might wake up and you're not as refreshed as you'd like to be, or sometimes you're like, you feel worse when you wake up than when you went to bed. Has anyone ever experienced that before? Okay. So what we did is we did an experiment because we're looking at all the opportunities for healing and we want to try to make them as free and as passive as we possibly can. So when we sleep with our windows open, the carbon dioxide levels in our room is about 700. When we sleep with our windows closed, it's close to 1,200, which is going to be almost a 20% decline in cognitive function, just by simply keeping the windows closed versus having the windows open. Okay, so if you learn nothing else today, I encourage you to make sure that you keep your windows open, have some fresh air coming through your home. And, one of my friends, he built a multi-million-dollar home and he thought of everything. His windows are Wi-Fi proof. All the materials are all organic and non-VOC and they don't off-gas anything. And he brings in fresh air from the outside. And we had him put this meter on and he was over 1,000 in his home. Okay. So sometimes these invisible things that we may not be looking at or not considering can be negatively impacting our health. Okay. So Sabrina's got the right idea, right? And maybe she didn't even know that this is a thing you can measure, but she just intuitively knew that having fresh air coming in is a smart thing for us to do. Okay. Just in case you're wondering, outdoor air is usually around 400 to around 450. And then, it can go up to 600 depending on where you live and depending on the altitude and so on and so forth. Okay. So so here's the thing, your air conditioner, unless it's pulling in your HVAC system, unless it's pulling in specifically outdoor air, it's just recirculating the air in your house. Okay. So that may not be changing and scrubbing out the CO2 that's there. So I always encourage you to get fresh air. The other thing that fresh air does is it brings in spores. It brings in microbial spores and fungal spores from the outdoors, which enhances our immune system as well. Okay, so there's lots of benefits to keeping your windows open. And if you don't want to keep your windows open, at least go out for a walk. So some of the most profound thinkers of our time and well before our time, one of the things that they would do to enhance their creativity is they would go for a walk in nature. We spend as human beings way more time indoors than we should be. We are designed, for the most part, to be outdoors. Right? So this concept of being indoors most of the day is actually very foreign to our physiology. Being outside has many, many tremendous benefits. Now, one of the things that I've learned over the years that's also important and, something that's often overlooked, and we did a little bit of it, is how we breathe. So the master regulatory system in our body that controls all of our function in our organs, in our cells, and our tissues is called the autonomic nervous system. Type in yes if you've heard of the autonomic nervous system, or type in no if you've never heard of it. Okay, so I see a few mixed responses. So the good news is that we're going to cover this in depth. So that those of you that have heard of it, I hope this gives you some new insights and a new way of understanding the autonomic nervous system and then using it as a tool for your healing and repair and regeneration. So let me just share my screen here. Give me one moment. All right. So Robbie talked about this. We have this fight or flight part of our nervous system. And we also have a rest and digest part of our nervous system. And what's really neat about this system is it's designed to help you heal. It's designed to also help you survive. But healing and survival are on different sides of the fence. So when clients come to work with us, one of the first things we want to evaluate is their nervous system. Because if your nervous system is stuck in fight or flight, you can never be in a state of healing, repairing, and regenerating, because the body can't do both at the same time. So I'm going to explain to you what happens as we go through a stress response. And that might help you understand, visually what's happening in your body and physiologically what's happening in your body. And that might help you, uncouple or unwind some of the challenges that you might be facing. And hopefully, mainly, I hope that it empowers you to make more conscientious choices. I know you're making the best choices that you can. Now let's make some conscious choices so that you can get the value and the benefits that you desire. So whenever we experience some form of stressor, it's going to come in through one of our six senses, right? We do have six senses. I believe we do have that sixth sense. I'm sure many of you do as well, that intuition, that intuitive faculty. So we have visual information coming in. 80% of our brain is devoted to visual information. So a big chunk of information comes in from our brain through our eyes. Next is auditory information, right? So certain sounds. Smell is another sense, right? So if we smell something, that can change our brain waves. It can actually change what we think about, right? If you smell the familiar smell of a loved one, right, instantly your brain is flooded with positive memories. If you smell fire, instantly your brain is flooded with what's on fire, right? So smells tell a story. Okay, we also have taste. Taste tells us a story, and we have touch. So all these senses come into our part of our brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala then has to process, is this a fight or flight situation or is it not? And that determination is made by whether we've had experiences or beliefs around the situation. So if you have a 2-year-old and a lion walks into the room, the 2-year-old is probably going to crawl towards the lion. Whereas an adult who has a different set of beliefs and perhaps even experiences is going to immediately go into fight or flight, right? So we know that the situation isn't always determinant of the response. It's the beliefs and the values and the experiences that we have that actually determines the stress response that we have. Once we have a stress response, once the brain determines, yes, this is a fight or flight situation, it instantly sends a message down the entire spinal cord. And it basically shuts off certain organ functions. There's a 90% decrease of blood flow to your liver and kidneys. There's an 80% decrease of blood flow to your digestive system. Your organs essentially go into a state of suspended animation, where there's enough blood sent to them to prevent them from dying, but not enough blood sent to them to function optimally. Does that make sense to everyone? Right? So we send enough blood to the organs so they don't die, but we don't send enough blood to them for them to thrive and for them to function optimally the way we want them to. Instantly, our blood pressure goes up because now we have to send blood to our arms and legs so we can run away from the animal that's chasing us, or we can get into a safer situation. Our body starts dumping hormones like adrenaline and noradrenaline and cortisol so that we can rapidly raise blood sugar. Do you know the main function of cortisol in your body is to raise blood sugar? Most people don't know that. So they eat a perfect, diet, low carb diet, but their blood sugars are still high because their stress is high. Okay, so cortisol's main job is to raise blood sugar. Our reproductive function shuts down. This is why you're seeing infertility rates through the roof these days, because stress is millions of times higher this day and age than it was when, certainly when I was younger, and certainly when some of you were younger, and my parents and grandparents, their levels of stress were totally different. And the types of stress that they had were totally different. Okay, so our body is facing a lot. And so it's important that not only to become resilient, it's one thing to become resilient, but how do we become armored from stress so that we don't have a response? So we're not always lighting up this stress fire and then figuring out ways to put it out. Right? And that really starts in the brain, not in the body. So one of the questions I started asking myself is, in any situation that I get into or any situation I'm involved in, is how can this be the best thing that's ever happened to me? Instead of letting my mind wander and imagining the worst case scenario, I try to imagine the best case scenario. And in order for me to do that, I have to slow down. I have to take a few deep breaths, and I have to access a part of my brain called the neocortex, right, where creativity lives. So by simply having a pause, slowing down, we can make much better decisions. One thing that also shuts down under times of stress is our immune system, because a white blood cell isn't going to save you from a lion. Now, the cool thing is our body is very simple. That's what, whether you believe in God or a creator, a grand designer, or whether you believe in, just random chance, we have this amazing body that's been given to us. And what's so amazing about it is that it's so simple to take care of. So how many of you would like to know how to shut this stress response off and get into a state of healing, repair, regeneration, reproduction, restoration, pretty much within minutes? Okay, so I see a lot of hands going up. So that's what we do, is we help you activate the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is mainly comprised of a nerve called the vagus nerve. The word vagus in Greek means wanderer. And if you look at a picture of the vagus nerve, which you kind of see here, this blue line that you see here, it goes to every single organ in your body. It starts off as cranial nerve number 10 on the brainstem. You have one on either side of your brainstem, and it comes down and it wraps itself around your lungs. It wraps itself around your liver. It wraps itself around your heart, your digestive organs, your reproductive organs. It literally covers all of these organs and provides it with information. Our vagus nerve, in my opinion, is one of the most intricate and important nerves in our body that we never learn about because we cannot see it, right? When we think of nerves, we think of nerves in our arms and our legs. We think of the sciatic nerve, but very rarely do we talk about the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve can be stimulated in a variety of different ways. One of them we just did. Deep breathing stimulates the vagus nerve. So deep diaphragmatic breathing, taking a full inhale, filling up the belly, filling up the chest, filling up the lungs, and letting it all the way out. And doing that a few times is a great way to stimulate the diaphragm, which then stimulates the vagus nerve. Another great way, and you might want to write some of these down, another great way to stimulate the vagus nerve is to hum. Believe it or not, humming, because of the mechanical vibration it creates in the throat, stimulates the vagus nerve. Singing, chanting also stimulate the vagus nerve. Laughing is one of the best ways to stimulate the vagus nerve, because every time you're laughing, your diaphragm is just going crazy. And that's creating a great stimulation of the vagus nerve. Crying also stimulates the vagus nerve. This is why we almost always feel better after we cry. Laughing and crying are a form of breath work. Have you ever noticed that there's a very distinct pattern when people cry? There's a very distinct pattern when people laugh, right? So these are built-in mechanisms of healing and repair. Sometimes we suppress, sometimes we hold back when we're laughing, even though something's really funny, or sometimes we hold back when we want to let the tears out. But I can promise you it's very deeply restorative and healing. So just let it go. Right? In this lifetime, you're human, so be human. Another great way to be able to stimulate your vagus nerve, and this is a little bit more advanced, but I want you to try it, at your own discretion, is gargling. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to put some water in your mouth, about 25 mils. You can work your way up, and it's like a weight, right? So start off small and then work your way up to an amount that's more comfortable for you over time. And you're going to gargle the alphabet twice. Now, you're going to gargle it very aggressively to the point where you're generating tears. Here's why the tears matter. Your vagus nerve inserts on your brainstem right next to the part of your brainstem that initiates tear production. So if we get a strong enough stimulation of the vagus nerve, you're going to start tearing. This is why when you laugh really hard, some of you might pee your pants, but some of you are actually going to start tearing up as well. All right, a little bit of humor for you folks there. So when we tear up, it means that we're getting a strong stimulation of our vagus nerve, and it's stimulating other parts of our brainstem enough so that it's creating tear production. So gargling the alphabet twice, you want to do it aggressively. That's going to be a great way to stimulate your vagus nerve. Now, why is this important? When we have proper tone in our nervous system, we increase blood flow to the liver and kidneys. We increase blood flow to the digestive system. We increase blood flow to the reproductive organs. We increase blood flow to our bladder, right? All the organs that we want to heal, we increase blood flow to them, right? People don't get like finger cancer, right? They get liver cancer, right? So a lot of chronic diseases and dysfunctions start in the organs because they don't always get adequate blood flow to them. Enough blood flow that they're not going into a state of necrosis, but not enough blood flow that they're functioning optimally. Is this making sense to everyone? Okay. Yawning is also, you can't always yawn on demand, but yawning is another way of stimulating your vagus nerve. Some people can. I know my music teacher, she would get mad at us for yawning because as soon as she saw someone yawn, she would start yawning. All right. So find a way to stimulate your vagus nerve. Another way to stimulate your vagus nerve is gagging yourself. So if you're not using a tongue scraper is a great tool to cleanse your palate. And you can use it to gently gag yourself just a couple of times, not so you're throwing up, but just to initiate that response. When we gag, what happens? Our diaphragm does it just jumps a little bit, doesn't it? Right? And that stimulates it. A lot of times when we gag, we start tearing up because it's such a powerful way to stimulate that vagus nerve. So a tongue scraper or just gently with your toothbrush, gag yourself when you're brushing your teeth. That's going to stimulate your vagus nerve. We encounter a lot of clients who struggle with constipation. And one of the things that we find is they take fiber, they take magnesium, they take a laxative, they try all kinds of different things. And it turns out that the reason that they're constipated is because they have weak vagal tone. And by doing something as simple as laughing, gargling, gagging, singing, chanting, humming, all the things we talked about, they're getting a great stimulation of that vagus nerve, and it turns on that digestive function up again. One of the things that happens as we all age is we decrease stomach acid production. And so when we don't have enough stomach acid production, we can't fully digest our food properly. This is why taking a few deep breaths before a meal, slowing down when you're eating, having a moment of gratitude plays such a huge role in our ability to digest our food. Okay, so a lot of times people will come to us and they'll say, Sachin, I've tried every diet under the sun. Nothing seems to be working. I've taken these pills and those pills, and I've tried this protocol and that protocol. I've eliminated this from my diet, and nothing seems to be working. How many of you can relate to that? Or maybe you know someone like that, right? And we look at what they're eating, we look at what they're taking, and it's perfect. You're doing all the right things. And the first question I ask them in that situation is not what are you eating or what are you taking, but how are you eating? Many of us have a lot of trauma around eating. Perhaps we were rushed when we were eating, right? Maybe our parents were fast eaters. Maybe some of you grew up in a home with multiple siblings. And if you didn't eat fast, you didn't get to eat at all, or you got to eat much less, right? I know some people can relate to that experience. I've heard many of those stories. So we carry that into our adulthood, even when that is not necessary for survival. Chewing your food is one of the most important ways to also stimulate your vagus nerve. So we have a 5C system that we talk about when it comes to optimizing digestion, right? All of us eat. So let's talk about digestion and how it relates to the parasympathetic nervous system. So the first C is to choose. You want to choose foods that align with your health objectives, right? Your food is your future self, right? So when I look at my plate, I just had a lovely soup my wife made for me earlier today. When I look at that bowl of food that I'm having, it's literally becoming parts of me, right? It becomes my skin, my hair, my bones, becomes my tissues. It doesn't just stick around for the 20 minutes or 30 minutes that it takes for me to eat it. It's going to stick around for quite some time. So literally your food is your future self. Now, we've all heard the saying that we are what we eat. And that's only partly true, because your digestive system is a tube that runs through you. Okay, so I know all of us here have probably swallowed a kernel of corn in our lives. And if we look in the toilet the next day, we see a kernel of corn, right? Because it didn't get into our bloodstream. It stayed within that tube and never made its way in, right? So we literally have a hole that runs right through us, a tube that runs right through us. And we have, as we go down this tube, we have a set of filters that absorb nutrients. But those nutrients can only be absorbed if certain criteria are actually being met. So I want you to think of digestion like a car wash. That's the simple analogy we're going to use. Each step in the car wash relies on the previous step being done. Does that make sense? Right? So if you're going through a car wash, it's like going through a little assembly line. You've got to wet the car first, and we put the soap on it, and then we put the brushes on it, and then we rinse it, put the wax on it, and we rinse it again, and then we dry it, right? Now, you wouldn't skip any of those steps if you wanted a good car wash. And you'd probably never go into a car wash that said, hey, this step is broken. We'll let your car go through for free, because it would damage the car. And you'd never go through it backwards, or you'd never get stuck in one spot, right? Because the car would never get washed properly. So digestion is just like that. We have a series of important steps that must take place in order for us to thoroughly digest our food. So the first step is we have to choose the right foods. Okay. And it's too difficult to make a broad generalization of what you should be eating ingredient by ingredient. But what I do know is that if you can eat a diet that keeps your blood sugar levels stable, that is not processed, right? We want to eat whole foods that we can recognize. So if I looked at my soup, I could name all the ingredients in that soup. And I see many of you are mature enough to understand that our food system has changed dramatically over your lifetime, hasn't it? What we call food today, our grandmothers would have never called food. They would have never fed us what our children eat today or what our grandchildren eat today. Right? It's food-like, but it's not food. Right? Food should nourish us. Food should not make us sick. Food these days is very ultra processed. The nutrients are processed out of it, and it's unrecognizable. So we want to choose foods that are recognizable. We want to choose foods that nourish our body. And we also want to choose how we feel about that food. Right? If two people eat the exact same meal, but one person views it as punishment and the other one views it as nourishment, they're going to digest it differently, aren't they? So choose the right foods, choose how you feel, and choose the right time of day to eat. So if one of your goals is to stabilize your blood sugar, maybe lose a little bit of weight, especially around the midsection, one of the things that you may have heard of is intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting can be a great way to give your organ systems a break. You don't have to cut back on the calories. So if you want to pack on muscle, you can still do intermittent fasting. You can eat the same foods that you're eating. You would just eat them in a shorter window. So instead of eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you might just have lunch and dinner, but you're packing all of your calories in an 8-hour window. And you're giving your body 16 hours of fasting time. This one tip has been transformational for many of my clients, and it doesn't cost them anything. In fact, many of them end up eating less, and it saves them money. In all studies that they've ever done, lowering your number of calories actually increases lifespan. So eating less definitely helps you live longer. Narrowing your feeding window to where you're eating in an 8-hour window and fasting in a 16-hour window also increases lifespan. And if you're up for it, periodically, it's a good idea to do an extended fast. It could be 24 hours of not eating anything, just drinking water with a little bit of salt in it. And if you're really up for a challenge, you might even do something called a 5-day fasting mimicking diet. This is where you're eating about 500 to 800 calories a day. However, what's happening, your body is going into a fasting state. You're getting rid of senescent cells. These are cells that are no longer serving you, that are basically past their prime. And you're activating stem cell production. On days 4 and 5 of a fasting mimicking diet protocol, you're generating billions of stem cells. And stem cells help you heal every organ, tissue, and cell in your body. We could do that for free, right? Actually saving money because we're eating less food. So you can look up fasting mimicking diet. There's free recipes that you can find online. And it's a great way to set yourself up for success. Okay, Ellie says, lectin-free since January, has lost 30 pounds, has changed with intermittent fasting, and the mitochondria has been helped. Yeah, lectins, for those of you that don't know, are basically compounds that are found in things like beans and legumes. They're protective mechanisms that the plants make, so we don't eat a lot of them, right? In nature, how many of you have ever harvested wild almonds or fresh almonds? Anyone? Okay. So I can guarantee you that you would never eat a handful of almonds if you had to harvest them yourselves. Because it takes so much work for one almond, right? But when it's all done for you, you can eat a whole handful of them, maybe even 2 handfuls of them. And now guess what? That's a lot of lectins that your body's getting, and that could create a problem for you. So lectins is a whole different topic. I won't get too far off into that. There's a great book written by Stephen Gundry, and it's called The Plant Paradox. You can look into that if that's something that you want to dive deeper into. So back to digestion. So the first one is choose. Okay. Intermittent fasting is a great tool that you can use. And then the other thing I want you to try to do as best as you can is try not to eat too close to bedtime. So about 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, you want to have your last meal. This is something that can be very challenging for people, right? Depending on the workday, depending on, how everything else goes in your life. But I'm not here to tell you what's right for you. I'm here to tell you what's right for your body. Right? So find that balance, right? Maybe it's an hour for now. Maybe it ends up being 2 hours is the best you can do. But we don't want to go to bed with a full stomach. In the first few hours of sleeping, our brain actually goes through a cleansing process, but that doesn't happen if our stomach is full. Okay, so we want to go to bed with an empty stomach. Next C is to chew your food. Chewing your food increases saliva production. Chewing your food increases oxygenation to the brain. Chewing your food helps you taste your food, which tells your brain what the chemical composition of the food is, so it knows what kind of enzymes to produce so it can digest it properly. If you're eating a salad or any plants, the surrounding outer shell of the cells of a plant are made out of cellulose. Our digestive systems do not make cellulase, which is the enzyme that breaks it open. Cows do, but humans don't. So if you swallow a salad, you could do the salad challenge if you want. Don't chew your salad, just swallow it and watch what happens. You'll poop out a salad the next day or 2 days later, depending on what your bowel motility rate is, because you can't digest the cell wall of the plant. So the only way to access the nutrients in the salad that you eat is by thoroughly chewing it. Now, I know some people may have issues with their bite. They may have issues with chewing. My grandmother had many, many issues with chewing when she got into her older years, and she couldn't quite get a denture that would fit her correctly. So her health greatly suffered because she refused to drink the smoothies we recommended to her. So juicing or blending a smoothie may be appropriate for some of you because you may be able to extract more nutrition out of the food versus trying to chew it if you don't have a good chewing pattern. So slow down and chew your food. Usually you want to get your food to the consistency of salsa until the food has an unrecognizable texture. We want to turn it into a pasty texture as much as we can. That increases the surface area of our food, right? A simple example, if you had a 5-pound block of ice versus crushed ice, which one would melt faster? The crushed ice, right? Because there's more surface area. So we digest food better when there's more surface area for the enzymes in our stomach to act on. When we chew our food properly, there's less requirement of us to drink a lot of water with our food. See, when we drink a lot of water with our food, we dilute the enzymes in our stomach. Your stomach acid is 1,000,000 times more acidic than your blood. So it takes a ton of energy to make stomach acid. When we chew, we stimulate stomach acid production. However, when we drink a lot of fluid with our meals, we dilute that stomach acid. Your stomach acid is designed to do a few things. One, it helps break down proteins. It starts the breakdown process of proteins into amino acids. The next thing that it does is it kills any viruses and bacteria that may have made its way into our food. The next thing that it does is it lowers the pH of the stomach contents so that the trap door in the bottom of our stomach opens up. So food doesn't stay in our stomach longer than it should. The majority of people who have heartburn actually have heartburn because they don't make enough stomach acid, not because they make too much. Your stomach is designed to get down to a pH of 2. If you dipped your finger into your stomach, it would burn your finger off. If you swallowed a nail, it would dissolve the nail. That's how acidic your stomach gets. It's meant to be acidic. It's when we don't make enough stomach acid, that's when things start regurgitating, because the food literally starts rotting inside of our stomach. So slow down, chew your food. And this, I promise, it sounds so simple. I know your grandmother's told all of you this, but it makes such a huge difference. Here we are in 2023, right? And the greatest advice I can offer you isn't a magic pill, but it's chewing your food, right? It's timeless wisdom. But now I hope you have a better understanding of why we should chew our food. The next thing we want to do is chill, right? So choose, chew, and chill. We want to be in a relaxed state. Remember, digestion doesn't stop when you take your last bite. It's kind of when, digestion just kind of begins when you do that, right? The active part of digesting has stopped because there's no more food to be chewed. But now your stomach and your pancreas and your gallbladder and your liver and your small intestine, they all have to go to work, don't they? So digestion continues for several hours after you take your last bite. So you want to be conscientious of that. In a lot of cultures, what do they do after lunch? Type in the answer if you know the answer. What do they do after lunch in most cultures? Drink wine. They sleep, right? They take a nap. What do we do in Western culture? We go right back into fight or flight, right? And then we wonder why we're not digesting our food. And we wonder why we have IBS. We wonder why we have constipation, right? It's because we're doing the biological opposite of what our body actually needs. So there's actually nothing wrong with our body. Our body is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing, digesting our food, but it's now we're competing for resources. So you have to chill, and you have to be conscientious that the process of digestion continues for a few hours after you're done eating. I might be saying, Sachin, my life is super stressful all the time. Well, we need to change that then, right? We need to be chill as much as possible. Some people are 80-20. 80% of the time they're stressed out, 20% of the time they're chilling. We need to flip it, right? And I would go as far as saying 90-10, right? We want to be cool, calm, and relaxed 90% of the time. If you ever watch an animal in the wild, it's like the most boring thing on earth. They just sit around and do nothing. I'm not suggesting that you do that, but they don't get sick, do they? Zebras don't get ulcers. Lions don't get ulcers. They don't develop the same issues as we do because they're in tune with their nervous system. So chill. The next one is to cherish. Be grateful for that meal. Be grateful for all the people involved in putting that food on your plate, right? The farmers, the packers, the shippers, the grocery store clerk, your wife, your husband, the chef, whoever cooked your meal for you. Be grateful for all the people involved in that equation. And the fifth one, and this is where we can help, is to check. Okay, so you should do a visual inspection of your stool every day. Your stool should be a dark brown color, kind of like a milk chocolate bar. Hopefully I didn't ruin your appetite for milk chocolate, but that's the color of your stool. If your stool is black, that could indicate that there's bleeding in the upper GI tract. If your stool is black, that could also be an indication of iron supplementation. So you can rule that out if that's the case. If your stool has blood in it, that's never normal. If your stool is greasy or shiny, that's usually an indication of fat malabsorption, which means you're not absorbing your fats properly. If your gas has an odor, okay, we have about 1 liter of gas a day, so that's normal. But if your gas has an odor and it's strong, then that means you're not digesting your protein properly. If despite chewing your food, you still see a lot of undigested food in your stool, That could be an indication of an insufficient pancreas. Your pancreas may not be secreting enough enzymes to fully digest your meal. Now, one of the interesting things about your gas having an odor, we'll talk about gas here, because it's important, is that it means your proteins aren't being digested. Now, the significance of that, going further up the digestive tract, if your proteins aren't being digested, where does protein digestion start again? In the stomach, right? Now, here's what's really interesting, because we're all interested in our immune health, right? So your body's immune system does not react to amino acids. It only reacts to proteins. Let me explain that a little bit more. So when proteins get digested, they break down into amino acids. Think of furniture from IKEA. Think of the finished piece of furniture like a protein. But if I take that furniture apart, it turns into amino acids. Does that make sense to everyone? Our body is not well suited. It shouldn't be absorbing proteins from our digestive system. It should be absorbing amino acids. When our digestive system becomes inflamed, then that filtering process becomes compromised. We call that leaky gut. And now what happens is undigested proteins enter into the bloodstream, which creates an immune response. So your immune system isn't doing anything wrong. Your immune system is supposed to react to proteins. The problem is there should not be proteins in your bloodstream. Okay, so by healing the gut, by getting you to digest your food more thoroughly, especially your proteins, it's going to reduce significantly the amount of stress on your immune system. And for any of you who are struggling with autoimmunity or know someone who is, that's one of the fastest ways to fix their immune system, is to get them to digest their food properly. Another thing to look for in your stool is the color. Now, we said it should be more of a chocolate brown color, milk chocolate. However, if it's a light tan color, like the color of a cardboard box, then that usually indicates that your gallbladder is not functioning properly. So a tan or clay colored stool means that your liver or your gallbladder is not making enough bile, and bile is responsible for helping us absorb our fats. Now, crucial fat-soluble vitamins are A, D, E, and K, which are all important for our immune health. One of our gallbladder's main functions is to help detoxify our body. It helps get rid of excess hormones and toxins and estrogen through our stool. Now, one of the things that we recommend to our clients is getting an annual stool test. And a stool test helps us see through a laboratory analysis the things that you can't see by simply looking at your stool. It tells us if there's pathogens. It tells us if there's overgrowth of bacteria. It tells us if there's an imbalance in your microbiome. You see, stress comes in many forms, right? There's the conscious stress that we have, but then there's also stressors that are happening below the surface in our microbiome. Our microbiome is about 7 pounds of bacteria in our gut. And believe it or not, our microbiome eats before we do. When we eat food, our microbiome is there to gobble up that food and help us extract nutrients from it. And so the foods that we eat feed a healthy microbiome or feed a dysfunctional microbiome. And a dysfunctional microbiome is a chronic 24/7 stressor on your physiology. It wreaks havoc on your immune system. It wreaks havoc on your inflammatory system. And it's often overlooked. So stress comes in many, many different forms. Okay, now the cool thing is everything that we talked about today are things that you can actually measure and quantify and address very affordably and very simply. Now, I know that I could keep talking, and I could keep going on and on and on, but I want to make sure we save some time for questions. So, Robbie, I'd love for you to help me moderate here, and we'll take some questions. And I hope you found this helpful. There's always so much to share. There's so much that I could talk about, and I know that there's so much more that you would love to learn as well. But we'll take some questions, and let's see where that takes us.
Diana Young, are you still in the meeting with us? Yeah, I see you. Awesome. So she said, stress is causing me to lapse into poor posture while doing chores, tensing and hunching forward, which results in backache. How to change this bad habit? So it's very interesting because, one of the things that Sachin said was everything starts in the brain, not in the body. And if you're a VIP going through a biomechanical optimization system, which if you don't know what that is, it's in simple terms, it's optimizing all the mechanics of your body and fixing your body while you get more fit. Well, that whole process, it actually doesn't start like here, right? That's cool to build the muscle, but it actually starts here. It starts with retraining the higher centers of your brain and your cerebellum. And a lot of what Sachin talked about lends you to having a foundation of having a quiet, stable mind in which to work from, in which to do these things so that you don't feel overwhelmed. So whether you're on the mechanics piece with the fitness, you actually train your brain on understanding positioning and alignment and proprioception and all of these things, it actually starts here and then retrains your peripheral body structures. Well, the same way as with what Sachin shared, which is like with the breathing and remembering, you know what, I do feel a little stressed right now. Let me take a little pit stop in life and my daily routine and do the breathing methodologies that Sachin has shared with you both in this session and we also have in other episodes. So really breathing focused content as well, which I can have Patricia drop in the chat here for you to find that. But it's taking that moment and retraining with these things that Sachin has shared with you, your neural associations, right? Because you get associated, for example, let me give you an example. So like one of my natural habits used to be having a Marine Corps drill instructor father, literally, is I would like gung-ho through it. Like, oh, I'm stressed. Like I can overcome that. Like you don't notice like this little quiet chatter and all the stuff going on in your head. And this can build anxiety and other issues, right? So what I ended up learning, sharing some personal stuff here, how to overcome things like anxiety is like, no, those are real stressors that are happening and they need to be addressed and you need to activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Just thinking about that, just realizing, okay, getting overstressed, that red light like in your car or the red line in your car with like overheating, that's what's happening to you. Let's bring it back down. Let's take a pit stop and let's work on your mind. And the more you do that, what ends up happening is you change your behavioral pattern. Literally the circuitry of the way your body and your mind thinks about stress starts to change so that when that happens, you don't go, no, I'm going to work through it. You go, no, I'm going to take the time. I'm going to recover. I'm going to keep my foundation where you're going to be more tranquil, like Sachin has exhibited with us over the last hour and 10 minutes, how calm, cool, and collected he is. So that's huge. It's really the root to it. Like the problem is the solution, basically, right? The problem of, oh, I keep forgetting to go back into good posture. Well, just keep reminding yourself. And in biomechanical science, which is probably very similar in like retraining your body habits as well, is 3,000. I know it's a big range, but 3,000 to 30,000 repetitions it takes to retrain a motor pattern to where it becomes more unconsciously correct. But that's just exposures, right? So like each rep and then it counts for an exposure. Well, with what Sachin's sharing, is you could just think like right now, you could sit at home and think about something you learned today and think, next time I eat, next time I get stressed, next time, whatever, fill in the blank for you, I'm going to use this tool that Sachin taught me. And just thinking about it and going through it in your mind, that's a rep. Do it again, second rep. Do it again, third rep. Do it in real life, that's a rep. And then like You chew your food one time, that's a rep. Chew your food more the next time, that's another. So you can get these 30,000 to 30,000 repetitions much faster than you would think. But those are some things to feed back for you on how best to apply this whole like brain first, then actions come second. With that being said, and Sachin, once again, pleasure as always, been amazing show, and I'm sure everyone absolutely loved and enjoyed this. And what I would like to do now is turn on your audio. So Patricia's going to give you an innate ability to unmute yourself and go ahead and share what you would like to say to Sachin. And then when we close, we'll keep the meeting open. So first we'll say bye from me for now. Lots of love to you. I'll let Sachin say his farewell, and then we'll let you say farewell to Sachin.
Well, thank you, everyone. I greatly appreciate this opportunity. Thank you to Robbie and Patricia for co-facilitating this. And I'm glad you enjoyed this conversation. We're just scratching the surface of what it means to be healthy, happy, and whole. And you're in such wonderful hands. And I'm grateful to play whatever role I can through today's conversation and some of the previous conversations that we've had. And thank you for your attention. And I hope that your current self is thanking you for sticking around and that you learned a few new things. I'm so grateful for that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I have learned a lot. So much love that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for everything we've learned today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next. Thank you. And if you could look at the questions on the chat. Thank you.
Is that Becky?
Thank you, Sachin,
Yes.
from Australia. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. From down under. Love it.
Yes, it's been very interesting. Learned heaps today. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Robbie and Patricia. Much love.
You're
I have to go sell. Gotta go sell a house now. So bye-bye.
See ya.
Good luck.
Make it
Thank
make
you.
it awesome.
Thanks, Robbie and Patricia, too, from Elaine in Australia.
Oh, you're so welcome.